The Airco DH.9, also known after 1920 as the de Havilland DH.9, was a British bomber used in the First World War, a single-engined biplane. It was a development of Airco's earlier, highly successful DH.4 and was ordered in very large numbers for Britain's Royal Flying Corps and Royal Air Force. Its engine was unreliable, and failed to provide the expected power, giving the DH.9 poorer performance than the aircraft it was meant to replace, resulting in heavy losses, particularly over the Western Front. The subsequently developed DH.9A had a more powerful and reliable American Liberty L-12 engine. Design and development. The DH.9 was designed by de Havilland for the Aircraft Manufacturing Company in 1916 as a successor to the DH.4. It used the wings and tail unit of the DH.4 but had a new fuselage. This enabled the pilot to sit closer to the gunner, observer and away from the engine and fuel tank. The other major change from the DH.4 was the choice of the promising new BHP Galloway Adriatic engine, which was predicted to produce 300 horsepower and to give the new aircraft adequate performance to match enemy fighters. By this time, as a result of attacks by German bombers on London, the decision was made to almost double the size of the Royal Flying Corps, with most of the new squadrons planned to be equipped with bombers. Based on the performance estimates for the DH.9, and the similarity to the DH.4, which meant that it would be easy to convert production over to the new aircraft, massive orders were placed. The prototype first flew at Hendon in July 1917. Unfortunately, the BHP engine proved unable to reliably deliver its expected power, with the engine being derated to 230 horsepower in order to improve reliability. This had a drastic effect on the aircraft's performance, especially at high altitude, with it being inferior to that of the DH.4 it was supposed to replace. This meant that the DH.9 would have to fight its way through enemy fighters, which could easily catch the DH.9 where the DH.4 could avoid many of these attacks. While attempts were made to provide the DH.9 with an adequate engine, with aircraft being fitted with the Siddeley Puma, a lightened and supposedly more powerful version of the BHP, with the Fiat A12 engine and with a 430 horsepower Napier Lion engine. These were generally unsuccessful on the 2nd of January 1919, and it required redesign into the DH.9A to transform the aircraft. Operational history. To boost the rate of production, quantity orders for the DH.9 were also placed with Alliance G and AMP J, where Short Brothers Vulcan, Waring and AMP Gillow and National Aircraft Factories No. 1 and No. 2. The first deliveries were made in November 1917 to 108 Squadron RFC and it first went into combat over France in March 1918 with 6 squadron, and by July 1918 9 squadrons operational over the Western Front were using the type. The DH.9's performance in action over the Western Front was a disaster, with heavy losses incurred, both due to its poor performance and to engine failures. Despite the prior derating of its engine, between May and November 1918, 2 squadrons on the Western Front lost 54 shot down, and another 94 written off in accidents. Nevertheless, on the 23rd of August 1918, a DH.9 flown by Lieutenant Arthur Roseperling of 49 Squadron, with his observer, Sergeant Frank Bell, single-handedly attacked 30 Fokker D-7 fighters, downing 5 of them. Captain John Stevenson Stubbs managed 11 aerial victories in a DH.9, including the highly unusual feat of balloon busting with 1 The DH-9 was also more successful against the Turkish forces in the Middle East, where they faced less opposition, and it was used extensively for coastal patrols, to try to deter the operations of U-boats. Following the end of the First World War, DH-9s operated by 47 Squadron and 221 Squadron were sent to southern Russia in 1919 in support of the White Russian Army of General Denikin during the Russian Civil War. The last combat use by the RAF was in support of the final campaign against Muhammad Abdullah Hassan in Somalia during January to February 1920. Surprisingly, production was allowed to continue after the end of the war into 1919, with the DH-9 finally going out of service with the RAF in 1920. Following the end of the First World War, large numbers of surplus DH-9s became available at low prices and the type was widely exported. The South African Air Force received 48 DH-9s and used them extensively, using them against the Rand Revolt in 1922. Several South African aircraft were re-engined with Bristol Jupiter radial engines as the Impala, serving until 1937. Civilian news. Because of the large number of surplus DH-9s available after the war, many were used by air transport companies. They provided a useful load-carrying capability and were inexpensive. Early air services between London, Paris and Amsterdam were operated by DH-9s owned by Aircraft Transport and Travel. A number of different conversions for civil use were carried out, both by Airco and its successor, the de Havilland Aircraft Company, and by other companies such as the Aircraft Disposal Company. Some radial-powered DH-9Js continued in use until 1936. Variants. DH-9 revised version of the DH-4 with the pilot and observer gunner placed closer together. DH-9A was designed for Airco by Westland Aircraft to take advantage of the 400 horsepower American Liberty L12 engine. Apart from the new engine and slightly larger wings, it was identical to the DH-9. Initially it was hoped to quickly replace the DH-9 with the new version, but the shortage of Liberty engines available to the RAF limited the new type's service in the First World War, and it is best known as a standard type in the post-war RAF, serving as a general-purpose aircraft for several years. 2,300 DH-9s were built by 10 different British companies. DH-9B conversions for civilian use as 3-seaters. DH-9C conversions for civilian use as 4-seaters. DH-9J modernized and re-engined conversions using the 385 horsepower Armstrong Siddeley Jaguar 3 radial engine, used by the de Havilland School of Flying. DH-9J Impala re-engined conversions carried out by the South African Air Force, powered by a 450 horsepower Bristol Jupiter V radial piston engine. Impala 2 re-engined conversions carried out by the South African Air Force, powered by a 480 horsepower Bristol Jupiter 8 radial piston engine. Mantis re-engined conversions carried out by the South African Air Force, powered by a 200 horsepower Wolseley Viper piston engine. Handley Page HP 17A DH-9 experimentally fitted with slotted wings. -9 United States dollars per 9A DH-9s manufactured in the United States by the U.S. Army's Engineering Division and Dayton Wright. Operators. Military operators. Afghanistan. Afghan Air Force 18 aircraft, including 16 built by Dux Aircraft Works, acquired from 1924. Australia. Royal Australian Air Force 1 used by the RAF from 1920 to 1929. Number 1 Flying Training School RuthAS, Belgium Belgian Air Force 18 aircraft. Canada Canadian Air Force. Bolivia Bolivian Air Force. Chile Chilean Air Force received 20. Estonia Estonian Air Force operated 13 from 1919 to 1933. India Greece Royal Hellenic Naval Air Service. Kingdom of Hejaz. The Kingdom of Hejaz received 9 DH.9s and 2 DH.9Cs between 1921 and 1924. 5 remained in existence in 1932. Ireland Irish Air Service. Irish Air Corps. Latvia Latvian Air Force. Netherlands Royal Netherlands East Indies Army Air Force operated 36, some of which were re-engined with Pratt & Amp Whitney Wasp radial engine withdrawn in 1934. New Zealand Royal New Zealand Air Force. 3 Airco DH.9s in service with the New Zealand Permanent Air Force from 1923 to 1929 as advanced training aircraft. Paraguay Paraguayan Air Force. Peru Peruvian Air Force. Poland Polish Air Force 20 received in 1920, used during the Polish-Soviet War until 1929. Romania Royal Romanian Air Force. Kingdom of Spain Spanish Air Force. South Africa South African Air Force, part of the Imperial Gift, semi-locally modified with Jupiter engines and named Impala. Soviet Union Soviet Air Force. Switzerland Swiss Air Force. Turkey Turkish Air Force. 4 aircraft in service from 1921 to 1924. United Kingdom Royal Flying Corps. Royal Naval Air Service. Royal Air Force. United States American Expeditionary Force. United States Marine Corps. Uruguay Uruguayan Air Force. Civil Operators Australia Qantas. Belgium Sabina. Denmark Det Danske Luftfartsselskab. Netherlands KLM. Romania SNNA. Kingdom of Spain CIA Española del Tráfico Aéreo. United Kingdom Aircraft Transport and Travel. Handley Page Transport. Bikaner State Maharaja Ganga Singh. Survivors. Of the thousands of DH.9s built, only a few have survived to be preserved. F-1258 is displayed at the Musée de l'Aérospace in Paris, with the second DH.9 being preserved at the South African National Museum of Military History, while GEAQM, the first single-engined aircraft to fly from the United Kingdom to Australia, is preserved in the Australian War Memorial at Canberra. The remains of 3 DH.9s were discovered in India in 2000, one of which is displayed at the Imperial War Museum Duxford, and another in the process of being restored to flying condition. Specifications. General characteristics: crew 2, length 30 feet 5 in, wingspan 42 feet 4 and 5/8 in, height 11 feet 3.5 in, wing area 434 feet squared, empty weight 2,360 pounds, max takeoff weight 3,790 pounds. Power plant 1 times Armstrong Siddeley Puma piston engine, 230 horsepower. Performance: maximum speed 98 knots, endurance 4.5 hours. Service ceiling 15,500 feet. Climb to 10,000 feet 18 minutes 30 sec. Armament: guns, forward-firing Vickers machine gun and 1 or 2 times rear Lewis guns on scarfring. Bombs, up to 460 pounds bombs,